Welcome back to part 2 of this first free motion quilting lesson for the Skill Builder block of the month. I have here a few more things that I want to talk about, and then we're going to start drawing and getting inspiration for our free motion quilting. One of the things that I'd like you guys to have prepared are some 10 by 10 quilt sandwiches. And these are going to be for practicing our free motion quilting. What I did was I took a layer cake of solid fabric. It was actually very inexpensive. The solid fabric is from Connecting Threads. And so I'm not using my precious Kona or any of my precious fabrics for this because these are just going to be little samples. So I cut these up, and I have a real piece of low loft cotton batting in between. And I'm going to use quite a few. It's up to you how many you make. I find them really helpful. Kind of the goal of using these little squares is to practice and to warm up. If you were going to go and run a couple-mile race, you probably would want to stretch and warm up before you run. Well, it's going to be the same thing with free motion quilting. Even if you have more experience with free motion quilting, you still want to warm up. I don't always quilt. I don't quilt every single day. Sometimes it goes a couple weeks, or sometimes I could quilt once a month. It depends on the project that I'm working on. And so when I sit down to quilt, I like to warm up. My stitches tend to be a little rougher and less smooth when I first start out. So I'd rather do that on a test block than on my actual quilt or my actual quilt block. And we're going to be practicing different techniques and different designs. So having these sample little quilt sandwiches is going to be really helpful. So I have a little stack of them here, and I plan on making some more, however many you want to make. The next thing I need you to do is to print off from the course materials in the block lesson for this month the Soundwave and Magnum block outlines. And this is just an outline of the block, and we're going to use this for coloring in our free motion quilting designs. This will be really fun. This is a great exercise that's going to really help us learn. The next thing you need to have is thread. You need to choose what color thread and what type of thread you're going to use. Now, this is often a preference issue. What brand thread you use is really based off of trial and error. You're going to have to try brands and find what works best for you and for your machine. I personally use Aurifil thread, and I absolutely love it. And I've done a review of it on my blog before, and you can find that. And I'm going to be using a 40 weight. Now, 40 weight means the thread is a little bit thicker than an average 50 weight. And for quilting, I personally like it to stand out just a little bit more with thicker thread. If you want your quilting to just blend into the block, then I would suggest using a 50 weight thinner thread. Now, for your color choices, we are using, I know I've been looking at the pictures of the amazing blocks in the Flickr group, and we are all using a lot of different colors. So choosing thread can be kind of a difficult choice, especially when we have such a high contrasting background fabric. So you may need to use more than one color thread on your blocks. Now, what I have chosen to do is I plan on using a black thread for the background of my blocks, and I then chose one color of orange, which I'll use on all of my orange and my red, and then one shade of purple, which I'll use on all of my purples. So that does mean that when I'm completed with sewing or quilting the purple, then I'm going to switch my thread, my bobbin and my top thread, out with a new color. Now, I will do the same thing with the background and so forth. So that's up to you. If you're using like a white background and then very colorful in your colored pieces, then again, you're probably going to want at least 2 different color threads. If you want a thread that's going to blend really well with all colors, then I think that a light gray or light beige works really well for that. So once you have your thread, you should be all set. Make sure that you have your blocks ready to go, basted, 3 layers, the backing, batting, and your block on the front. If you have questions about batting, that's kind of another preference issue. What brand you use, what type you use, really depends on the effect that you want or what you're going to be using the quilt for. I personally am using a low loft, cotton, warm and white batting. And I find that it works really well. It's really warm, it's really comfortable, it washes well. It has a rating of 10 inches. Now let me talk about that a little bit. Every branding, you need to read the pack, or for all the batting, you need to read the package, because on the package it's going to tell you how far apart you can quilt. Now on the warm and white batting, it's up to 10 inches. So you can quilt up to 10 inches apart and your quilt is not going to fall apart in the wash and it's not going to wad. Now some battings are smaller. Some may be only 5 inches. So you need to pay close attention to that. We're going to be quilting pretty densely and pretty heavily, so this might not be an issue, but it's something to just keep in mind. There's also polyester batting, poly cotton batting, wool batting, bamboo. There's a lot of choices, and again, this is going to be a preference issue, and I personally, for this quilt, I'm going to use a low loft cotton batting. I do experiment with other types of battings for other projects. It just really depends. So once you have your blocks basted, we're going to be ready to go. The first thing that we are going to venture into here is working on drawing our designs. One of the most important things with free motion quilting is learning how to draw the designs and how to think ahead. When you're quilting, you need to know what is coming next and how to get out of tight spots and think ahead so that you don't get stuck. Doing that will really, really help you improve with your free motion quilting. And the best way to practice that thought and muscle memory is by drawing. So I encourage you to get a quilting sketchbook where you can just doodle, doodle, doodle. I mean, when you're out and about, maybe you want something that fits in your purse, because when you see something inspirational, when you're out and about, you can just doodle the design and just practice it. When you're sitting in front of the TV, just practice the stipple. Practice different designs, drawing it in a continuous line without picking up your pencil, because that's going to be the same effect as using or quilting free motion quilting. So drawing is going to greatly improve your free motion skills. And we're going to actually draw in our blocks so that we can actually decide, what am I going to quilt here? And this is just a guide. You don't have to do the exact same thing as in your drawings, but this will actually help you think ahead and give you some foundation for the designs in your blocks. I also want to talk about some inspiration. I have 3 books here, and there's also so much inspiration online. And you can check out Leah Day at the Free Motion Quilting Project. She has over 360 designs of different free motion quilting. She did them one a day, and they're amazing. So really inspirational designs. Angela Walters is a long arm quilting queen. She's amazing, and she has been very inspirational to me and very encouraging. And she has 2 books, and she also has quiltingismytherapy.com. So that's another great resource. And then there's lots of books. This is actually her book here. This is called Free Motion Quilting by Angela Walters, and this was her first book, and it has some basics of free motion quilting, and then it shows all of her different designs and how to actually draw them and how to quilt them with steps along the way. And she also has In Her Studio, which talks about how to use quilting to make different effects in the design of your quilt. So adding color to your quilt, adding movement to your quilt, using the negative space in your quilt. This is also another fun book. It's called Doodle Quilting, and it has a bunch of different continuous line quilting designs. There's the feathers and leaves, stipples, flowers, and it's all continuous line. The important thing to know with free motion quilting is it must continue. The more stopping and starting you have to do, the more thread tails you're going to have to bury, and that is just a hassle. So you really want a continuous line. You want to be able to start at the edge of the block, and you want to be able to go as far as you can without having to stop and change your thread, or stop and change positions and actually move the needle and take your thread off, if that makes any sense. You want to keep going and make a continuous line. And that's not to say you're not going to stop. That's just every time you have to break your thread or cut your thread and stop and reposition. So we want to try and minimize that as much as possible. That's why continuous designs are really, really the best for free motion quilting. So that's why when I am talking about drawing your quilting designs, that you keep in mind that you draw and keep your pencil down. Try not to pick your pencil up. Try and think about drawing a continuous design that doesn't require you to have to pick your pencil up.